popularly called today. What's it been? It started out as Al-Qaeda, then became ISIS or ISIL, then Islamic State. And the point is that no matter what bloody name it calls itself, it's the same basic organisation controlled by the same in the hidden shadows operations led by the United States and Israel.
And far away.
Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity, Stop the New World Order. Welcome to HPANWO TV. And I'm here, this is an exclusive because we're in the Wembley Arena waiting to see David Icke. I'm here with Tino, my friend. Sue. You don't want to be on camera, do you? No, Sue doesn't like to be on camera. We're going to see David Icke live. This is, I don't know if this is the 10th or 11th live show I've seen of David Icke. I love the guy and I love coming to see his shows. He's so inspiring, he's so knowledgeable. I've got the t-shirt there, you see. And basically, I'm a David Icke groupie, basically. That's what I'm saying. And we're in this huge stadium. They've cordoned off some of it, but I reckon we're going to get 5,000 people here today, all doing the non-comply dance and cheering and coming away hopefully with something really, really grand and uplifting, which will give us hope for the future. And so, thanks for joining me. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity, Stop the New World Order. Welcome to HPANWO TV, and I'm outside the Wembley Arena. You see behind me is the rising sun symbolism of the Wembley Stadium. They got rid of the Masonic Twin Towers, they knocked down that one, they rebuilt one with the Masonic Rising Sun. But we've just seen the first part of a 2-hour segment, it's actually 2 hours 20 minutes of David Icke's lecture. And it was, as always, he really raised the roof. He was extremely inspiring. He talked about the nature of reality. I've made some notes here. Sorry, I should have got these notes out beforehand. I should get them out now. Really, he talks about awakening to the reality of who we truly are, and we can paint a different picture, because he used a lot of sort of artistic analogy when describing the universe, and about how, and scientific analogy too, because he's explaining how the universe is actually a holographic projection. And as physicists have now discovered, as they go deeper and deeper into the subatomic level, you discover quantum mechanics, and as it's described, as subatomic particles don't behave like solid matter, even though they make up solid matter. They behave more like bits of information, and this is really, really interesting. And all other things he talks about, because the fact that consciousness itself can actually create the illusion, the actual hologram, and as many Oriental philosophies for thousands of years have said, that reality is an illusion, and with our thoughts we make the world. And what David has talked about is about how that is actually true, and science is beginning to catch up with that. Mainstream science is always several millennia behind philosophy anyway, and spiritual practices as it is, but they are starting to catch up now, and it's extremely really interesting to think now that everything around you is actually a holographic projection, and that our consciousnesses are creating it. And he talks about Masaru Emoto, who sadly died a couple of days ago, who discovered that water has memory, and water can be affected by thought, which is really incredible. It has enormous implications for human health. And but of course, that's the world we live in. It's so horrible, it's so mean, there's so much cruelty and suffering, and environmental damage, and damage to the earth, damage to people. You wonder to yourself, why is it we live in this horrible world where there's so many evils going on around us, and our lives are miserable and boring, and we do jobs we don't like, and we pay tax? So why is that? If the universe is our creation, and it's a holographic projection of our minds, why have we created and projected such a horrible one? And that's what David's going to answer in part 2 about why that is. So I'm looking forward to that. It's pretty intense. I'll tell you what, by this evening I'm going to be absolutely knackered, because this is a 10-hour event, probably going for 12 hours knowing David. So I'll keep you posted with that. Take care. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity, Stop the New World Order. Welcome to HPANWO TV. It's now, we've reached the halfway mark. We've gone through part 2 of David's speech. He expanded a little bit more during the course of this particular speech on the subjects he was talking about in the first one. He began to discuss that if this universe is an illusion and a hologram, how is it that we are controlled? And the truth is, we are controlled because the universe is a hologram, and he used a lot of analogy from the film The Matrix and the architects. He basically talked about the archons. Now, this is a phrase you might have heard some researchers like John Lash and Graham Hancock use. Basically, the archons are also what is known as demons, or what Muslims call the jinn, and they are some kind of entity from another world that has intruded into, has found somewhere of intruding into this one. And by another one, I mean like another dimension or something like that. And so basically, these archons have found a way of adapting. Sort of, it's almost like they're like a parasitic infection on this universe, and they have several methods of which they do that. For instance, they understand how the universe operates on a spiritual level. They also control certain people, and David was talking about the psychopaths and about how psychopaths may be, in a sense, rather like the glove puppets of the archons. And of course, they've reversed everything. The archons or the jinn or the demons have, or the demiurge, have created a deviant creation. And this is a phrase used by Amitabh Stanford, the deviant creation. And in a sense, they've taken what the world should be and they perverted it. They turned it into something the opposite of what it is. And you see this in the world, like David quoted Michael Elner. Everything's backwards in the world. Lawyers destroy justice, governments destroy freedom, religions destroy spirituality, doctors destroy medicine, etc., etc. So that was extremely interesting indeed. Now, David also went on to talk about the fall of man, and this is an indication that perhaps there was a time when, in our past, when we didn't have this archontic influence, this archontic intrusion onto our world. And that world would have been extremely different. It would have been much more pleasant. Humans would have been much more capable. It'd be almost like we're set free. So we'd almost like be. It's like if you get ill with some kind of parasitic infection, you get sick, and you feel dirt, you feel low, you get a fever, and then eventually you die. Now, to use that analogy, without that archontic infection, would be like a healing process, and we would actually be better. So we'd be like a healthy person. So, I mean, I don't know exactly what that entails, but there's no doubt that we're talking about maybe the old paradises of Eden. And David uses the analogy of the Avatar movie. Avatar's a brilliant film by James Cameron. It's an animated film about a planet where these blue people live, and they live in harmony with nature, and they're all they live in a kind of idyllic state, and then humans land. This is very odd. It's a reversal to most science fiction, where the humans are the good guys and they get invaded by aliens. In this film, the humans are the invading aliens. It's quite amazing, and they sort of like drag the world down. They cut down all the trees and they blow the place up, and they look for minerals and stuff like that. So then at some point there was this fall of man, and the idea is to try and get back out of that and have a rise of man. David talks about the planet Saturn, which he believes is essential to the control of the world. And it's a lot of what we think of as sun worship may actually be Saturn worship. The planet Saturn, of course, has these rings around it, and it's symbolised by an eye. And there's also a hexagon on the top of the planet. It's twice the size of the Earth. It's a completely regular hexagon, a pattern in the clouds. It's like a standing wave in the clouds, which is shaped like a hexagon. And there's no scientific explanation about how that is there, how that shape is maintained. And it's really interesting. He talks about the moon as well, and about how the moon might be artificial. We're definitely going down the rabbit hole. It's curiouser and curiouser. Like I say, we're only halfway through, so there's a lot more to come. Hopefully we'll find out more answers in the next part. Thanks for watching. Hospital Reporters, Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order. Hospital Reporters, Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to HPANWO TV. We've just been through the third episode, the third part of David's speech, which was actually quite grim in many ways. But I've got my notes here. Sorry, I've just got the notes out. Yeah. Well, basically, he was talking about a lot of the nuts and bolts methods of manipulation that the government uses against the people, or the archontic intrusion. And in the real world, this translates as things like mind control organisations, like the Fabian Society, the Frankfurt School, which is where we get political correctness, feminism, cultural Marxism, and things like that. Also, it translates into people like Edward Albanese, who invented spin, public relations, and it goes into the education, the media, and the way that children are conditioned from a very young age, the way that the media sets up false opposition and the phony bones of contention, as Richard D. Hall calls them. But there are people speaking out, people like Aaron Russo, film producer. Just before he died, he did an interview with Alex Jones explaining how the Rockefellers are organising so much that's going wrong in the world. Also, there's things such as David's favourite, problem, reaction, solution. Create a problem, glean the reaction, offer them the solution. And these include things like 9/11, climate change, and things like that. All these things are problem, reaction, solutions. And this leads to what? It leads to the European Union through totalitarian tiptoe, doing things very closely, slow. Carbon tax, these horrible new light bulbs that poison the environment, microchipping, the dissolving of national sovereignty and creation of regional super blocks and eventually a world government. Things like the legal system and austerity, and also the environment. The environmental damage is very, very real, but it's being used, especially fake environmental damage like carbon, or it's carbon dioxide gas as it should be called, which is being used to justify all kinds of fundamental changes to society, including the destruction of communities such as villages, moving people out of the countryside, forcing people into towns, into human settlement areas, wilderness zones, reduction of the population. I mean, they're talking about, they reckon there's 8 billion odd people in the world. They want to reduce it to 500 million, right? Well, that's a 16th of what we have now. I mean, how are they going to do it? They're going to have to kill people. They're also talking about demolishing the economy and rebuilding it into a new form through currency resets and bail-ins, where they force people to fund banks through their bank accounts. I call that bank robbery, quite personally. But it's already been done in Cyprus, where they called it a levy. It takes apart things such as fracking and weather control and modification. The Lynmouth flood in 1952, where I think 35 people were killed, and that entire village was wiped out. Well, that was weather modification technology. It was a test. It was a live fire test of a weather weapon, and they killed people to test the weapon. There's also medications like Prozac and vaccines and all these other things that are going on, and it's all designed as what Ian R. Crane calls bio-spiritual warfare, and it shuts down our pineal gland, where we have our connection to spirit, by calcifying it, by creating calcium deposits in there. There's things like Planned Parenthood, where they're genetically modifying people, and sperm counts of men are dropping, and makes it harder for us to have children, culling the elderly, disappearing bees, and then Zionism and the imperial Zionist agenda, which has got nothing to do with Jews. It's a political agenda. Jews are the victims of it. And recently we have ISIS, the Islamic State, which of course is controlled by Mossad and controlled by the CIA, and Ebola. Ebola is an American biological weapon. Well, there's so much more I can talk about here, like psychotronics and smart meters and the electromagnetic smog. I mean, David covered all these things, and it was very, very grim and very, very depressing, really. But I think now really it's a time when, hopefully in the last part of this show, David will give us something to be cheerful about. I certainly hope he does, because I don't want to go home thinking it's all a lost cause. Thanks for watching. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity, Stop the New World Order.
Well, Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity, Stop the New World Order. I'm now a bit tired. It's been about half an hour since we got out of David Icke, or a bit longer. We've actually gone from Wembley, we've had a drink in a pub, and we're now at the Golden, what's it called? Golden Grill. The Golden Grill restaurant. Basically, I feel a little bit overwhelmed by everything, and I've not quite got my thoughts together. But the part 4 was very uplifting. I mean, as I said at the end of part 3, that David told us straight how bad things are. And it's very, very easy to think, well, how on earth are we going to get out of this mess if it's that bad, if things are really that low? And there's times when I've thought to myself, well, can we? Are we wasting our time? And I know people who've given up. I know a lot of people who've given up. But I think after watching David, I've not given up, and I've still got hope. David began, there was a lot of music in this, because David talked about things like, well, what's the answer? What's the solution? And he said that we are. It's the perception, deception is the cause. The archons, the jinn, the demons, whatever you choose to call them, the reptilians, the red dresses, whatever you choose to call them, they've intruded into our world, into our universe. In a sense, we've allowed them in. It's rather like the parable of the sower. And
Thank you.
thank you very much. Cheers.
Bye.
Lovely, thanks.
David Icke.
Cheers, thank you.
Thank you. It's rather like the parable of the sower. I mean, in the sense that I know a lot of conspiratorial researchers tend to get very angry and they go, "Yeah, you Illuminati scum," etc., etc. And they play victim. There's no point us playing victim. The Illuminati are here, or the Jinn, or the Archons, whatever you choose to call them. They're only here because we let them in. It's rather like the parable of the sower, where the seed falls on fallow ground and things like that. So instead of playing victim, we have to become the stony ground. And David said that there's a Red Indian myth about two wolves that are fighting inside every man. One of them is fear, envy, hatred, resentment, bitterness, cruelty, and the other is love, peace, acceptance, spirituality. And the proverb goes this way: it says, well, which wolf wins? And the answer is the one you feed. And that's very, very meaningful, I think. David says we must not fear the future, we must not regret the past, we've got to live in the now, just deal with the present. However low we've sunk, however low this fall of man has happened, we can come out of it. And there was a lot of, what happened, there was a lot of music. We had this non-comply dance where there was a group of people who were basically dancing. They were there in 2012, this dance group, this brilliant percussion band, fantastic percussion band doing this non-comply dance. And everyone in the audience was doing it as well. And then there was this, Gareth came on with his rock quartet and sung a couple of songs. And then there was this band from London with these people singing a kind of calypso, reggae type song. A band called Rebel Control, singing these kind of calypso songs that are really, really good. And there was a band all the way from Canada called The Ancient Order, which did some great songs with videos as well. And a lady called Louisa Love sung this song with these guys with these amazing string instruments. I'm not sure what they were, kind of guitars. And there was basically, I think the last part of David's session, of David's event today in Wembley Arena, it's more about creating an atmosphere. It's more about building energy and raising energy. That's what it was about, I think, primarily. And I think it really did achieve that. And I mean, I'm tired now, I'm knackered. I haven't quite got my thoughts together. It's a bit overwhelming. I find these events, I mean, the information that comes at you and the emotional roller coaster you go on is quite mentally exhausting. But I'm very, very glad I went. I'm very, very grateful to somebody who's donated some money to allow me and my partner Sue to attend this event. I'm very, very grateful to that person. But they're very much appreciated. I very much appreciate what they've done. I hope they enjoyed my reports I do on this event, and hope I've helped contribute to all of you HPANWO TV viewers and everyone who reads my report on the HPANWO blog. In basically, firstly, I mean, you know how bad things are, but just don't give up. All right, that's David's prime message. It's not too late. Don't give up. Thank you for watching HPANWO TV. Hospital Porters, pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order.
Wow, that was me there at the David Icke live show, and as you can see, I suppose I was a bit overwhelmed by the atmosphere and everything that was going on at the time. And I really, at the end of that day, the last shot where you see me in the restaurant, I feel like I climbed up a mountain. All I was doing was sitting down all day. It's really quite remarkable. But I really, first of all, I've got to say thank you. I've got to say thank you to somebody. The same thing happened that happened at the Probe conference the week before. Somebody offered to pay for me to go. They just said, I'll pay for you to go, I'll buy you a ticket. So this happened again. I wasn't originally going to go to see David live in Wembley, and someone offered to buy me a ticket. And again, it was one of these say yes or no situations. And so I said yes. I felt a bit embarrassed, but I said yes. And of course, I'm very, very grateful to my benefactor for allowing me to go to this magnificent event. That's all I can say, really. Because once I decided I was going to go, I was really looking forward to it, and I sort of like thought, well, I've got to go now. It's like before I wasn't going to go, now I'm going to go. So See, David Icke has probably been the most influential man in my life. All right. I mean, I know in the first part I described myself as a David Icke groupie. I don't think I am really, but that's how I described myself when I was a bit overcome by the atmosphere at the event. But basically, during the time when I was emerging, I mean, there was no point when I woke up, so to speak, but I was emerging into conspiratorial awareness, and David was a great guide to me. Reading his books was enormously important to me at that period in my life. However, I feel in a way I've moved on from him, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I don't know if I can say that without it sounding like I'm putting him down, but I'm not. I'm not putting him down. I'm not dissing him at all by saying that. It's just that, I mean, I still support the guy, just as I did in 2000 or so when I first read one of his books. I just feel like I've gone to the point where I sort of like almost don't need his guidance anymore. I still respect him, but I'm sort of like to the point where I can. It's almost like he's a lighthouse in the fog, and I've sort of reached the open ocean. I can set my sails. That's how I kind of feel it, and because I don't feel the need to read all his books. I don't feel the need to catch every radio and TV slot he's on like I used to. So when I was in Wembley watching David, which is a while ago now, I mean, I'm actually filming this last part of the video a few days after the event, because I couldn't do it straight after because of technical problems to do with the computer I was using. It was Windows 8, say no more. But I was seeing David from a very different vantage point as I did when I saw him in the first time, when I saw him in, say, Stoke-on-Trent in 2002. This I think is interesting. It's very, very interesting. And I got to speak to other people at the time, back then, after 2002, at the gig in Stoke-on-Trent, where I met other people. I met up with other people. I joined the official David Icke forum, and I met up with other people. And we used to go to these. We used to go. They call them meetups, where we used to get together. We used to talk online. We used to go to these various events where places like Glastonbury and the Peak District and Avebury. And we used to organise them ourselves on the forum. Now, it's really, really... And we used to get together, and our first get together, I think, was 2006 or 2007, I went to, and it was really, really great, and it was like... we used to sit and we used to talk about David and all these ideas and that. The thing is, the David Icke official forum has gone downhill now. I can just see Bowler Hat Man rubbing his hands together going, yeah, but it did, it went downhill. But I was a regular poster on that forum, but it declined, it went downhill terribly. There was a very controversial incident at one point where a number of people got banned. People, I think, innocent members. That's a long story, go on. I've lost interest in that forum. I still log in now and again, but I'm just sort of like not interested. I'm just not. My heart's not in it. The people there are different people, and I'm not on their wavelength. See, it's funny, you know, because I attended just a few months ago. I didn't film it or anything, but I attended an event at the summer solstice. I went to the Barge Inn in Wiltshire, the place where I saw bases at the Barge a few weeks later, and there were a number of people there. They're basically the same people, more or less, mostly the same people who were at the first meetup. You know, 8 to 10 years ago, before. But it's totally, the atmosphere is totally different. Before, of course, everyone was talking about David and his ideas. This time, there was not a single kind word I heard for David Icke from any of them. And there was quite a lot of very open hostility towards David. So this is a good question. So what happened there? That's the big question, I think. Now a lot of it centres around the David Icke forum and the way that went downhill. The fact that David didn't intervene to do anything about it. He let the person running the forum do what he wanted. We also found out that David Icke's t-shirts, I don't know if this is still the case. It's not the case with the one I've got, but with some of them, I know they're made by a company called Gildan Gildan Activewear, and that is a notorious company. It's a third world sweatshop manufacturer basically, and it's notorious in that respect. It's on the watchdog list for many human rights organisations. It's got a plant in Haiti where it pays its workers next to nothing. These things, the blight of the third world, and they set up these factories in all these poor countries. They pay their workers next to nothing, and they go and flog these t-shirts for God knows how much in the richer countries. So the question is, why didn't David use a fair trade business for his merchandise? And that is a just criticism. I think David has got some explaining to do there. So see, but I think in that case, I think it's, again, like with the forum, it's more a case of oversight. It's not a case of deception. I think David tends to let other people do a lot of the running of his business, and I don't think he's personally behind these decisions. Yet it's still his name above the door, and he's accountable. And this is what we're basically saying to him. So I hope that David does listen to that and make people aware of everything he says about slave labour and poverty. You know, I expect better from him in that respect when it comes to his own business, quite frankly. So, like I said, this is not. I'm not doing a David Icke kind of. This is not a kind of David Icke glorification video here. I do have some criticisms here. Now, there's all sorts of people saying David Icke is a shill. That's hardly original. I mean, I've been called a shill. But I think it's very trendy to be anti-Icke. It's become a kind of badge of honour in a strange way. You can say, hey, man, you need to wake up, man, and realise that David Icke is a bloody shill, man. Yeah. So I'm trying not to say that in an Australian accent. The person I'm talking about knows who he is, and he knows I don't agree with him, even though I respect him a lot. Anyway, let's surf off into another subject. Yeah, the people's voice. All right, this of course with this multimedia organisation set up around this internet TV station, launched November 2013. Yet within a couple of months, it was on its way out. It's a miracle it lasted as long as it did, but the reasons why are very, very complicated. It's too much for me to go into now, but it's just, I want to say, it's just very, very sad that this happened to the People's Voice, because the People's Voice was such a brilliant idea. And there's you'll hear a lot of very shrill pundits talking about the People's Voice and about how it's David's fault, and David saying it's not his fault. But this is an important point, because I mean, ever since people have often said David is doing this for the money, it's about money, it's a money-making scheme, and people unbelievably even said this in the early days when he first started out on his journey. It's just crazy. It's incredible that people say that when you think that he left his job as a TV presenter to do what he's doing now. I mean, people say he's made a pile of cash off the Wembley gig because he charged 40 quid a ticket. £40 for a ticket at the Wembley Arena. How could he charge so much? He must be making thousands in profit. Well, I don't think so, because I mean, the Wembley Arena is not exactly a room above a pub. All right, it costs money to hire the Wembley Arena, and when you consider it's one of the country's top night spots or event venues, it's an absolute bargain when you consider it's a 10-hour show. It actually became almost a 12-hour show. And it's for £40. My daughter is actually going to the Wembley Arena in a couple of weeks. She's going to see Slipknot, a band she likes, and I can't stand. They're just a bloody noise, but Louisa loves them. She had to go there. She booked her ticket online. It cost over £100, and it's only a 3-hour show. So I'll ask people to consider that. The chances are David didn't even break even on Wembley. He may be lucky, he may have done, but I don't know. But of course, you know, once these, there's one thing I really can't stand: these amateur, armchair, self-righteous, self-appointed truth policemen. You know, that person's a shill, that person's a con man, and you have to agree with me. Yes, you do. Yeah. So, again, today, what I'm saying is, all right, I'm saying, how do we regard David Icke? And I just say he's a man. He's like all men, and all women for that matter, and that includes me. and it includes you, dear HPANWO TV viewer. Please don't try to deny it. David suffers from human fallibilities. He's flawed, and he makes mistakes. He suffers from failures of nerve, he suffers from failures of the imagination, he makes moral compromises. Every single one of these people who sat in judgment and pontificated over David Icke's character are guilty of the very same offences. And I think one of the problems maybe that David's admirers had was they put him on a pedestal. They sort of maybe... They put him on a pedestal that he didn't deserve, and they saw him as a wonderful man, and I saw him as a wonderful man, but I think I never saw him as anything more than human, whereas they may have thought that he might be above the imperfections that all other human beings have. And they felt betrayed when it turned out that way, and I know that he suffers from all the weaknesses that the rest of us share. So the question I have is David Icke, I think, has a wonderful message, and you saw how I was responding to it at the stadium when I was all drugged up on it, basically, to be honest. But even in reflection now, more rational and more calm, I enjoyed what I heard, and I think it's a worthwhile message. I think it's one that's worth hearing. It's one that David does a good job telling, and so my rational mind can say that too. The question is, I mean, does that make any difference? Could you accept him, warts and all? His various misdemeanours, whether they're real or whether they're perceived, does this mean that every good thing he's ever done, every word of wisdom he's ever said, is worthless as a result? Or can you just listen, just think about what he says, take what you need from his message, and withhold condemnation? Understand the value of his labours, understand what he does, accept his errors. I mean, George Gurdjieff, the famous spiritual teacher, it's very funny. George Gurdjieff was a spiritual philosopher from, I think, quite a number of years ago now, from the early 20th century. He had a reputation for in his wisdom for being a complete bastard. There's one occasion where he phoned up one of his students and he said, "Get over to my place right now. I want to see you right now." This was in the middle of the night. Right? This was in Russia, where it was probably winter and it was cold. This guy immediately put the phone down, grabbed his overcoat, went out, went to George's house through the snow or the rain or whatever it was, knocked on the door. Gurdjieff opens it. "Hello, what do you want this time of night?" The student says, "You wanted to see me, George. You phoned me up half an hour ago, remember?" And Gurdjieff replies, "Oh yeah, don't worry, it could wait till the morning." And he slammed the door in his face. And I think what Gurdjieff wanted, maybe the point Gurdjieff was making, was that he didn't want his students becoming too fond of him. He didn't want them glorifying him and worshipping him as a god. He didn't want them turning his ego, Gurdjieff's ego, into a sacred cow. And I think that's what we have to avoid doing with David as well. Because, to be honest, David does have an ego problem. He really does, a major ego problem as well. But I can accept that, and I don't think it diminishes the value of his message. And I love the man, and I think he's changed my life. And it's an honour to be at Wembley to watch him speak this time in 2014. And this is also, I'm very grateful for you, HPANWO TV viewers, for watching my little reportage and sharing it with me. Take care. Hospital Porters, pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order.
We are vibrating to particular frequencies, particularly frequency band. And that frequency band is going out. It's represented in our auric field. And so we're drawing in people, places, ways of life and experiences which relate to the frequencies we're putting out. So if you bring this to the big picture, we are living within an energetic